Good morning to all of you. To those of you that don't know me, my name is Hils. I'm the leadership team. I've been here since the Ark. And it's great to be here this morning. Isn't it good to just stand in the presence of God and sing truth? Don't know about you. I've had a particularly challenging couple of weeks. I know that there'll be many others here of whom that is true as well. And it's just so good, isn't it, to come and to gather with the people of God and to sing truth and to remember that he is the rock beneath our feet. I think it's always good in challenging times to look for the good news. We had some good news this week. Our car that has been in the garage for 4 months has finally been fixed. Miracles do happen. Mind you, we don't know if it works. We've just been told that it has been fixed. So that's very exciting news. So if you weren't with us last week, let me welcome you again, along with Matt and Lucy's welcome. If you're visiting us or if you weren't here last week, we have just begun last week a short series on prioritising the presence of God. This is the second week. And as we sort of remind ourselves about that sort of theme that we're looking about, we've been singing about it this morning, the presence of God. I wonder if we were playing word association football, what that phrase would sort of, what that phrase means to you. And if I was to say to you the presence of God, what kind of words you would say in response if we passed the mic round. What would you say next? The presence of God, blank. What would you say? And it might seem like a strange question to ask. It might seem like a sort of a strange thing almost to be talking about, because isn't the presence of God everywhere? Isn't that what we believe about God being God, that his presence is everywhere? Lucy read out a couple of verses from Psalm 139, verses 7 and 8. You know, where can I flee? This is David, a man who was hungry, who was credited in the Bible as being a man after God's own heart. He loved the presence of God. And he cried out, didn't he? Where can I go from your spirit? He literally wrote truth, the truth about God's omnipresence in his words. Where can I go? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. You know, if I'm having a great day, if the sun is shining and everything is amazing, you're there with me, Lord. And if I go down to the depths, if I make my bed in the depths, if I'm down in the depths, in the darkness, if life is going badly and I can't kind of connect with you, but Lord, you're still there. The Bible makes it clear that God is omnipresent. He is with us everywhere. Wherever we are, wherever we go, at all times, in all places, whether you're in the shower, whether you're in the car, whether you're in Tesco's, whether you're in the gym, God is always with us, whether we're aware of his presence or not. But there are times when God makes his presence manifest, where God sort of makes himself conspicuous, where we suddenly become aware of his nearness, of his presence with us. He makes his presence felt. He enables us to experience and engage with his presence more fully and more powerfully in certain moments. You know, David, the same guy who said, Lord, you're everywhere, he then prays in Psalm 51, don't cast me from your presence. So what does he mean if God's presence is everywhere? Why is David saying, don't cast me from your presence, don't take your spirit from me? He's making a distinction between the manifest presence of God and the general and the omnipresence of God. Tozer said this: the presence and the manifestation of presence are not the same. There can be one without the other. God is here when we are wholly unaware of it. That's his omnipresence. He is manifest only when and as we are aware of his presence. So God was present in the time of the Israelites because he's omnipresent. But his presence was more fully and intensely available first in the tabernacle. You know, and the Bible talks about there was no light in the Holy of Holies in the center of tabernacle because God's presence was there, and his presence was so bright, no artificial light was needed. God's presence, God's manifest presence, was in the temple later on. And when his presence filled the temple, the priests all fell down on the floor. Maybe they fell down on the flowers as well, I don't know. But they fell down on the floor because the sense of God's presence was so powerful. And when the high priest went into the presence of God in the Holy of Holies, a rope was tied to his foot because nobody knew, if his sin had been properly atoned for by the sacrifices, and if he died in God's presence, he'd need to be pulled out. Jesus was omnipresent. God was omnipresent when Jesus came to earth. But his presence was manifest, wasn't it, where Jesus was moving and working. Storms were calmed, diseases were healed, the dead were raised. The manifest presence of God was wherever Jesus showed up. And God was omnipresent across the earth, as he always has been, once Jesus had ascended back to heaven. But when the Holy Spirit was poured out, the manifest presence of God again became visible and tangible, amongst the believers and wherever the believers went, where the Holy Spirit was working. God is omnipresent, always, everywhere. But there are times when his manifest presence it becomes more tangible, accessible, visible to us, to experience him with us. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about prioritizing the presence of God, this series. A number of years ago, I was speaking at a conference, and in the morning session, I was particularly aware of a woman who was on the front row, and she looked very heavy, very oppressed. She had a lot of pain on her face. She was really struggling. It was obvious to connect with the Lord. And at the end of the morning session, she came forward for prayer, and I went to pray for her, partly because I'd noticed her, and I thought, Lord, are you drawing my attention to her? And she shared what was on her heart, and her sister had died from cancer 6 months previously. And she'd been with her sister when her sister had died, and it was obviously an incredibly traumatic ending. And this dear woman couldn't get past that experience of that final day of her sister's life. And so we prayed, and we invited the presence of God to come and minister to her. And as Jesus did, clearly the omnipresence of Jesus, he had been present with this woman, and he'd been present with her sister as she was dying. But what he did in that moment, as his presence came near to her, as he was praying, is he showed this woman where he had been in that moment and what he had been doing. And something broke over her, and something was released into her, and healing began to flow into her because he made his presence manifest and showed her at the time where he had been. And when she walked in the afternoon to the afternoon session, she literally looked like a completely different woman. There was a light in her face. Her shoulders were relaxed. There was a visible joy on her that just hadn't been there. The manifest presence of God showing up and, God doing his stuff. So when we're talking about, friends, prioritizing the presence of God, as we are doing in this series, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about prioritizing the manifest presence of God, prioritizing the value of encountering him, of meeting him, of hearing him, of being touched by him, of being transformed by him as he makes himself conspicuous in our midst. And I hope, in our families, that's what we're doing as well, seeking to prioritize the presence of God. As you know, we have 4 kids, and we taught them. We want our kids to know the truth about Jesus. We want them to know who he is. It's the truth that sets us free. But ultimately, the truth is meant to lead us to Jesus, isn't it? It's what Jesus said to the Pharisees. You study the Bible, but you don't come to me. And one of our desires as we were raising our kids was we want them to know the manifest presence of God, to experience him, to experience his touch, to hear his voice, to know his presence, to learn how to recognize his presence, as well as knowing the truth about him. Because it's those encounters with God, isn't it, that are transformative. So if you've got a Bible, I'd love to encourage you to get it out or switch it on, depending on which kind of version of a Bible you have. And we are just going to open the book of Exodus and look at a passage which will be familiar to many of us from Exodus 33. And the verses are going to come up on the screen. We're going to read 2 or 3 verses, 2 to something, 5 or 6, and then we're 2 to 3, and then we're going to skip to verse 8. And essentially, this is Moses having a conversation with God about God's presence. The Israelites, God has brought them to the cusp of the promised land. They've been in the wilderness for a number of years, and God basically tells Moses, right, the time is here. I'm going to lead you into the promised land. And he's having this conversation. And God says to Moses, I'm going to send, verse 2, I'm going to send an angel before you to drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Go up to this land that flows with milk and honey. The spies had been in. It was this incredible place that God was preparing for them. But I'm not going to travel among you, for you are a stubborn and rebellious people. You know, for those of us that know the story of the Israelites in the wilderness, you know, they were forever complaining, building idols, turning their backs on God, questioning his goodness and everything else. He says, I'm not going to travel among you, for you're a stubborn and rebellious people. If I did, I would surely destroy you along the way. And then jumping to verse 8, the next few verses describe the tabernacle where Moses used to go and speak to God and have his conversations with him. And what happened as the Israelites saw the pillar of cloud descending on the tabernacle whenever God was talking to Moses. I think it would have been such a cool thing to see. So verse 8, whenever Moses went out to the tent of meeting, that's the tabernacle, all the people would get up and stand at the entrances of their own tents. They'd watch Moses until he disappeared inside. And as he went into the tent, the pillar of cloud would come down and hover at its entrance while the Lord spoke with Moses. The manifest presence of God that all the Israelites could see. When the people saw the cloud standing at the entrance of a tent, they'd stand and bow down in front of their own tents. Inside the tent of meeting, the Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. Don't you love that phrase? As one speaks to a friend. Afterwards, Moses would return to the camp, but the young man who assisted him and who actually went on to take over from Moses, Joshua, son of Nun, would remain behind in the tent of meeting. One day, Moses said to the Lord, you've been telling me, take these people up to the promised land, but you haven't told me who you will send with me. You've told me I know you by name and I look favorably on you. Well, if this is true, Lord, and you do look favorably on me, let me know your ways. What a great prayer to pray. Let me know your ways so that I may understand you more fully and continue to enjoy your favor. And remember that this nation is your very own people. The Lord replied, I will personally go with you, Moses, and I will give you rest. Everything will be fine for you. Then Moses said, if you don't personally go with us, don't make us leave this place. How will anyone know that you look favorably on me and on your people if you don't go with us? For your presence among us sets your people and me apart from all the other people on the earth. Here's Moses saying, if you don't come with us into the promised land, if your presence doesn't come with us, don't send us up. Here are the people of Israel. They are standing at a moment of big change. They're literally on the cusp of a new season. They're standing at a point where God is about to fulfill the promises that he's made them. He's about to answer the prayers that they've been crying out. It's a moment that they've been longing and waiting for. It's a really big moment. And it's a moment that for them represents geographical change. They've been living in the wilderness for 40 years. And they're about to go and live in a completely different land where life is going to operate differently. They're going to move literally from one land to another. It's a moment that represents economic change for them. You know, they've been living by miraculous provision from God. Every morning he's supplied, the bread from heaven, and he's provided quail miraculously. He's about to lead them into a land where they're going to have to farm the land. They're going to have to plant seeds. They're going to have to wait for the seeds to produce fruit and then harvest them. Things are going to change economically for them. There's going to be a political shift for them because they're going to get a change of leader. And the change of leader will be a different character because all leaders have different characters and lead in different ways. Actually, as we know from the Bible, Moses was a shepherd leader and Joshua was a warrior leader. Different leader for different seasons. Same heart after God, but a political shift for them. There was also going to be a huge cultural shift for them as they go into the promised land. There was going to be a cultural change. Instead of living in tents and sort of upping and moving every time, the cloud moved on, they were going to be living in their own homes. They were going to have their own places to dwell. And there was going to be a spiritual shift for them too. Having been led by a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire where they could see the manifest presence of God sort of day in, day out. Where was God and what was he doing? There was going to be a spiritual shift where they were going to have to learn to listen to the prophets and listen to the judges and study God's law and lean into him that way. Huge new season that they're on the edge of. And some of us here will be on the edge of a new season. Maybe a new season is just beginning for you. Maybe you can see a new season about to begin ahead of you. Maybe for some of you here this morning, some of us here, it literally is a geographical change that's happening. Maybe you've moved to Cheltenham. Maybe you've sort of moved into the area. Maybe you know that the Lord is calling you away and there's a geographical change happening for you. Maybe there's an economic shift happening. Maybe you've just retired and everything's going to nosedive economically. Maybe you've had a career change or you've had a promotion and things are going to look up or things are looking up. Maybe there's an economic shift happening for you. Maybe there's a cultural shift happening. You've just had a baby or you've just got married where everything changes overnight. Maybe you've got an empty nest and your last kid has just left home. Maybe there's a cultural shift going on for you. Maybe you can sense a spiritual shift happening, a change in your relationship with God. Maybe you feel like you're in a new season of closeness with him. Maybe for other reasons you feel like he's more distant. He's more hard to get hold of. He's harder to kind of connect with. There are shifts happening in different seasons for all of us. We all experience different shifts at different times. We know that we're in a season, facing a shift, a new chapter in our church experience. We've acknowledged that. This is a sort of the end of one chapter, the beginning of another one. Moments of change are part of life. But here's the thing about them. The choices that we make when we begin a new chapter, when these moments of change happen, are disproportionate in their impact. Because the choices that we make in moments of change shape the DNA as to how we go on to experience that new season and that new chapter. Rick Warren, I love some of his language is fantastic. It's inspiration. He calls them momentous moments. And moments of change are momentous moments because they give us the opportunity to make choices, fresh choices in a new way. I think that's often why we end up trying to make New Year's resolutions in a new year. Momentous moments give us the opportunity to make choices that shape and impact, the new season that we are going into. So here are the Israelites on the edge of this, standing in this momentous moment. And I think that's probably one of the reasons we felt the Lord calling us to revisit this long-held principle, this long-held value in this church of pushing into, of prioritizing the presence of God. Because we're standing at a moment of change. And we want to make choices in this moment of change that shape, this next season. This is what the Israelites are about here. And Moses digs his heels in. He's the leader. He's the guy with the choice on for everyone that's following him. He's seen too much of the presence of God. He loves the manifest presence of God. And so he digs his heels in. And in this moment, he says to the Lord, I don't want to go into the promised land. I don't want life without you. Even if it's better than life in the wilderness, I don't want to go into the promised land if you're not coming with us. If your manifest presence doesn't come with us. I've been ruined for the promise. He doesn't say that. He's been ruined for the presence of God. You might promise us an angel, Lord. You might promise to protect us. You might promise to answer all our prayers. You might promise that it's going to be amazing. But if we don't have your manifest presence, Lord, I don't want to go. I don't know about you, but I find this, inspirational and challenging at the same time. Because choices are revealing, aren't they? They tell us about our priorities and our preferences. You're sitting in a restaurant, sushi or burger? Sushi, no question about that. Night out or night in? Spend your money on a nice holiday or upgrade your car. Put your marriage first or your career first. I had one that I wrestled with on Friday morning. We had a lovely invitation out for breakfast. Go out for breakfast with some friends and have a great time, or wrestle with the scriptures. And most of us fall for the lie a lot of the time. Culture tries to persuade us, doesn't it? That we can have it all. And occasionally we can, but basically it's a lie. We can't have it all. We have to make a choice. And Moses is facing an extraordinary choice at this moment in time. Promised land without the presence of God. Wilderness with the presence of God, the ability to experience him, to know his nearness, to know his closeness. I wonder which you would have chosen in that moment. Moses, it's a no-brainer. It's an absolute no-brainer. He didn't have to go and pray about it, think about it, ask other people what they thought. It's like, no, Lord, I'm not having it. If you're not coming, I'm not going. During lockdown, I know many of you have lived in Cheltenham for years and been ahead of the game. We only discovered the artisan boulangerie in lockdown because somebody posted it on their Instagram. And I think before lockdown, they'd been selling their bread in the morning, but they basically set it up, that area, didn't they, as a bit of a community in lockdown. You could go and get your coffee, and you could go and get your croissant, and you could basically go and meet people that you weren't really allowed to meet in the queue, the right kind of distancing. And we got into the artisan boulangerie. It became a bit of a lockdown treat for us. And I have to say, as people who often, spend time in France, Tim used to be a French teacher. He used to persuade us that's why we needed to go on holiday so he could practice his French. And we've eaten French croissants over the year. Going to the artisan boulangerie, it has ruined us for croissant. We love the croissant there. It is absolutely amazing. They are absolutely amazing. And it's kind of ruined us for any other kind of croissant. We've tasted the artisan boulangerie croissant, so no other one is good enough. It's a bit like that for Moses with the presence of God. He's tasted the presence of God in the wilderness. We looked last week at the story of the woman of the well. She had an encounter with God, and what did it do for her? She had a personal encounter. She heard his voice. He touched her life. He enabled her to connect with the love of God. It changed her story. It changed her ability to impact her community. She had an encounter with the presence of God. Well, Moses was the same. In the wilderness, he'd seen the cloud. He'd seen the fire. He'd seen God healing people. He'd seen the provision of God. He'd heard God's voice. He'd stood in God's presence. He'd known God's nearness. That phrase, they used to talk together as friends. He'd known the close friendship of God. He'd known what it was like to be intimate with God, to be connected. And he was addicted for life. He was addicted for life. And I don't know about you. I don't know whether you're addicted to the manifest presence of God or not. Some of us will be, some of us won't be. Maybe some of us haven't tasted the goodness and the nearness and the power of God coming up close and personal and touching our lives in the way that he does when his presence is close. But I want to remind us again, I think the Lord wants to remind us again that the promise of his presence, the promise not just of his omnipresence, but his manifest presence is for all of us. It's for all of us. He wants to speak with all of us as friends. What did Jesus say? John 15, I have called you friends. I no longer call you servants, I've called you friends. Think back to the Garden of Eden. God's original blueprint for us as human beings. He created Adam and Eve, as a son and a daughter. He wanted friendship with them. He created them in his own image, each made unique and special. I hope you know that again this morning. You are made in the image of God. There is a divine imprint on your heart and on your life. God doesn't just love you, he likes you. You've been made in his image. You are unique. You are special. Only you can offer him the unique relationship that you in your uniqueness can offer him. And he made you and he made me. He made Adam and Eve for friendship, to live in the intimacy, the presence of a loving God. And and he created the Garden of Eden, that place it's called paradise, isn't it? That's what Eden means, paradise, pleasure. He put them in that home so that they could know the pleasure of experiencing and living in the love of God, day in, day out, nothing hindering that. A place of pleasure and enjoyment in experiencing God. That was the original plan for them. That was the original plan for us. To live in his love, to walk with him, to experience his presence, to know what it is to be alive in his presence. And we know that blueprint gets broken as they reach out for the apple, as they decide to ignore what he said, as they decide to mistrust him, as they try to do things their own way. We know that it gets broken. And for me, that's why that phrase in Genesis 3 verse 8, when God comes looking for them in the cool of the day and calls out to them, where are you? I don't know about you, but for me, that's a verse, that's a phrase that's loaded with pain. I think you can hear the pain in God's heart. It's not disappointment that they've been disobedient. It's a desperation that the closeness, the connection, the intimacy, the friendship that they had has been broken by what's happened. Because what are they doing? They're hiding from God. They've withdrawn from his presence. They've retreated from him. And let's just remind ourselves, friends, sin does all kinds of things. We know that God hates sin. We know that he died to deal with the problem of sin. But the real problem of sin, yes, it impacts us. It messes up our lives. It stops us loving each other. It's a sin against love. But I think the real reason that God hates sin is because it makes us withdraw from him. Sin pulls us away from him. It makes us retreat from God, whether we end up blaming him from stuff, whether we end up hiding from him because of our shame, whether we end up, ignoring him, whether we end up distrusting him. Ultimately, sin pulls us away from God. And God's heart is to be close to his people, to be present with his people. That's what Eden is all about. And the rest of the biblical narrative, from chapter 3 of Genesis until we end up with God physically forever, is about God finding ways to be close to his people. God finding ways to be present with his kids. The whole of the Bible narrative is about that. Whether it's about the tabernacle, where God fills the Holy of Holies with his presence so the leader can go in and hear what God's saying and go out and tell the people. Whether it's the temple, where God puts his presence. We talked about that. Whether it's Jesus, where God put his presence in Jesus so he could be seen. And then for us, who've had the power of sin destroyed by receiving his forgiveness from what he did on the cross, the Holy Spirit, God's presence coming to live within us. That's God's heart for us, friends. If we need reminding about it, let's hear it again for that this morning. But here's the thing. To experience his close, transforming presence, to experience more of the manifest presence of God in our lives, in our personal lives, and in our church life together, we have to prioritize his presence. We have to prioritize it. We have to make it a top value. And it starts with longing. It starts with longing. There's a lot we could say about how do we pursue the presence of God? How do we host the presence of God? How do we recognize the presence of God? What can we do to sort of set ourselves up for God to manifest his presence to us? We'll do some of that next week. But it begins with a hunger for the manifest presence of God. It begins with a hunger like Moses had, that we would walk closely with him, that we would know him with us, that we would see him at work amongst us, that we would know close friendship with him. It starts with longing. Moses was hungry. That cry, I'm not going, Lord. I'm not going if you don't come with me. It was rooted in a hunger for the presence of God, for the love, the life, the joy, the peace that comes when we see God at work in our midst, when we feel his touch upon our lives and on our hearts. He wanted to be close to God more than he wanted anything else. I wonder if that's what we would say about ourselves this morning. I think that's one of the things that the Lord is doing in us in the church family. He's stirring up our longing and our hunger for more of the presence of God in our midst, the manifest presence of God. I think that's what he's doing. And all that happens when Jesus makes himself conspicuous amongst us. The healing, the freedom, the deliverance, the comfort, the counsel, whatever. And we believe as a leadership team that is what God is wanting to provoke in this season. He's wanting to stir up a hunger in us, that longing. I think he is doing it. I think there's more to come. Listen again to what Moses says at the end of this conversation with God as he chats to God as his mate. Brilliant example of how to talk to God, how to have an honest conversation with God. He says this, how will anyone know, this is verse 16, that you're pleased with me and that you're pleased with the people, your people, unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth? What is going to set us apart? What is going to show everybody else that we're your people and that you're with us? Well, it's the manifest presence of God, isn't it? Moses knows that without God's manifest presence amongst them, yes, he is omnipresent, he is everywhere, but without God's presence manifesting amongst his people, how are they going to look any different to any other group of people on the face of the earth? They might behave differently, but that's not what Moses is saying. He's not saying we need a good behavioral code so we can look different. He's saying we need your presence, Lord, to show up amongst us so people can see that you're with us and we're your people. Friends, the church is meant to look different to the charities that operate in this world, to the bunches of people that do good works. And there are so many, and they're amazing. But the church is meant to look different. And how are we meant to look different? What is meant to distinguish us? The presence of God. God in our midst. We have something, the presence of God, to offer the world that nobody else can offer. But we have to be prioritizing and pursuing his presence. Last story. Some of you know this. My mother, about 10 years ago, was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And she didn't know the Lord. And I wasn't really able to share him with her because, some conversations that hadn't gone very well when I was an enthusiastic teenager and 20-something-year-old meant that, it was a bit of a conversation that was off limits. But every time we went to see my mum, we just offered to pray for her. I used to say to her each time we went to visit her, Mum, can I pray for you? And she'd say yes. She didn't want to talk about God and about Jesus, but she did want to receive prayer. And so we would, if it was me on my own, or if it was me with Tim or the kids, we would just gather around her and we'd lay a hand on her shoulder. And we used to pray very simply. Of course, we prayed, Lord, would you heal her? But we used to pray, Lord, would you help her? Jesus, would you help her to know that you are present with her? Help her to know your presence. And we'd pause and we'd wait and we'd just say it again. Help her to know your presence with her, your love for her. And we did that every time we saw her. Fast forward to the week that before she died. And I was obviously longing to have a conversation with her about the Lord. And I didn't know how to start, didn't know what to say to her. So I just kind of reverted to type. I was in hospital with her and I just said, Mum, can I pray for you? And she said yes, as she always said, because she liked being prayed for. And I asked her what she wanted me to pray for. And she basically said, every time you've prayed for me over the last few months, I've just felt this incredible peace. I felt this love. And she just used all these words to describe the presence of God. She'd felt something that I couldn't offer her as a human, but something I could offer her as a follower of God. She felt the presence of God. And so in that moment, she said, I want to give him my heart. And it was a response not to a great chat, not to a long theological explanation about who Jesus is and what she wanted to know. It was a response to experiencing the presence of God when we prayed for her. We sang that song this morning. Gosh, Jay could probably see. Had tears running down my face. Lord, you're all I need. Draw me close to you. And I don't know how many of us would have been singing it from here and how many of us would have just been singing it with our mouths. It's good to sing truth, whether it's coming from, the core of our beings or not. But I believe the invitation for us in this season is to become a bunch of individuals, but also a family of God that are singing that as a heart cry. Lord, draw us close to you. You are all we need, because when we have your manifest presence amongst us, when we know you near, when we are experiencing your touch, we've got more to offer other people. We feel more alive and we're more effective on this earth for you. So I want to encourage us, friends, as we go through this season and these next few weeks, that we make that our heart cry, to allow God to stir us up. Lord, stir me up to long for, to hunger for more of your presence. Because the more we experience his presence, the more everything changes. Amen.